Hi, it's Ron here, and I want to do part 2 of my video, Is the Bible Bullshit? Just as a bit of a summary from my last video, if you remember, I tried to talk about the question I often get asked as a teacher, so how can we believe the Bible? It's full of BS, it's full of made up stories, encourages slavery, so on and so forth. And if you remember from last video, I said, well, the Bible is, it is bullshit if you just want to take it as science. It's not meant to be science. It's rubbish if you think it's a book trying to predict the future, trying to predict, oh, Jesus is going to return very soon, so you better be good, otherwise you're going to be you're going to be destroyed. The Bible is, it's not meant to be read as a science book, not even meant to be read as a historical book. It's a religious book teaching religious truths in different literary genres, and its main aim is to get you to have a relationship with God now and to live out that relationship through a life of love and service to other people and all of creation. Remember, I said the Bible is it's made up of 3 strands. One strand is the human author, one strand is the historical and social conditions of the author, the other strand is divine revelation. And it's up to biblical scholars and intelligent church leaders to work out, okay, what's merely from the human and from the social conditions of the author, and what's really the divine revelation. What's really the message God is trying to communicate in these stories. Okay, and what I'm saying is that it's mainly a religious message, it's mainly a spiritual message to do with the here and now, much more so than the past or the future. It's I said its main aim is not to teach history. That's not to say it's ahistorical. The Bible, and this is one of its main themes, that the Bible is rooted in history. It's rooted in the history of the Jewish people, and it's rooted in the history of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus and of the early church community. But around that history, it has legend, it has mythology, it has theology, and one of the job of the scholars is to sort of peel away the theology, the legend, and the mythology, and to find out what really happened in history. But that's not to say that the legend and the mythology and the theology is all rubbish. No, it contains very profound spiritual truths that are certainly applicable to the life of the individual and the life of the society. And what I want to look at today is some of those truths, some of those major themes that you do need to cherry pick. Often people say about the Bible, you're just cherry picking the good bits. And I say, well, yes, you are cherry picking the good bits. You have to do that because the Bible is not a set of conclusions. It's more a record of the process. It's a record of human beings listening to God and trying to work out what God is saying to them in their history. So it's looking at history with theological glasses, with religious glasses, and it's not looking at history simply for the sake of history. It's not recording history simply for the sake of history. It's recording history to try as a way of saying, okay, how has God spoken in our history? What is God saying in and through our history? What is God saying in the history of this man Jesus? What is God saying in the history of the early church and of the life of the Jewish people? And it's something we have to do each generation. What is God saying to us now in our own history? What is God saying about, the need for peace, the need to care for the environment? So, what are some of the major themes? Well, the first theme, I think, an obvious one, is that the Bible is saying God made the universe. It's up to science to tell us how God made the universe. The Bible is much more interested in who made the universe and why it was made. So the Bible is saying the universe and human life was made for a reason. We're here for a purpose, and we have an ultimate end. which is in God. God is our source, God is our sustenance, and God is the ultimate end, not only of the individual, but of all of the universe. In an atheistic worldview, it's basically pessimistic. The atheist has nothing to say to the young girl dying of cancer, except, well, that's it. Bad luck, you know. You got the short stick. The atheistic worldview has nothing to offer the old man who sits by the bedside of his dying wife, who's been his, faithful and devoted wife for 60 years. The atheistic worldview is ultimately pessimistic. It has no hope. And I think the human being cannot live without hope. The human being has been made for hope. We need that light at the end of the tunnel to keep us going. And so the Bible is giving us ultimate hope. The Bible is saying that love is stronger than death. I think love demands eternity. The love you have for your child, the love you have for your friends and your loved ones just demands eternity. You just cannot imagine life ultimately without the people you love. And the Bible is saying that, well, that feeling you have is correct. The Bible is saying love is stronger than death. In the atheistic worldview, the only eternity is the eternity of the grave, the eternity of death. The Bible is saying, no, that's not true. You're not just some accident. You're not just some cosmic accident, this cosmic fluke. You're here. You were intended. You are here for a reason, and your life is heading somewhere, and the life of the whole universe is heading somewhere. The other theme of the Bible is that it's saying that this God who created the universe, the ultimate nature of this God is love. Jesus is saying that this God is ultimately life-giving. This God is forgiveness, merciful, compassionate, humble, serving. Jesus is saying that if God is love, then the very nature of love is to give of itself. Jesus is saying that the role of the human being, therefore, is to receive the love that is being given. The Bible is saying that God wants to give himself away or give herself away. God is trying to give God's self away. And so the role of the human being is to receive this God. Now that opening to God, that receiving to God is what we mean by faith. Faith isn't just faith isn't you standing here and believing that there is a God somewhere up in the sky somewhere. The old man in the sky scenario. No. Faith is believing that God is everywhere and that this God is loving you and giving himself to you each moment, each second. And the good news is that this love is free. It's unconditional. It's got nothing to do with whether we deserve it, because none of us ultimately deserve it. It's a totally free gift given to us in all our ordinariness, in all our sinfulness, in all our brokenness, in all our depravity. This love is given to simple, ordinary human beings. And that's why it was called good news. It's got nothing to do with whether we earn it or not. Too much of religion makes God's love dependent on some sort of worthiness issue, whether that worthiness, God will love you if you obey the commandments. God will love you if you go to church on Sunday. God will love you if you go to the mosque on Friday. God will love you if you get circumcised. Too much of religion puts conditions on this love, where I think the essential message of Jesus is that this love is given. This love is free. You can never earn it because you already have it. You can never make yourself worthy of it because you already have it. It's who you essentially are. That the human being in their deepest center is a child of God. Okay, that's another way of putting it. So, the next thing I want to talk about is the idea of the incarnation. Christians believe that the Word became flesh. God became a human being. God became part of the evolutionary history of the universe. So that's what we celebrate every Christmas, that God became a simple, ordinary human being. Now, what is that saying? That is saying that the divine and the natural world are not separate. They're not separate worlds. It's not earth down here, heaven up there. It's they're together. We don't believe Jesus is just God. Okay, we don't believe Jesus is just man. As Christians, we believe that God and man have come together. So the supernatural and the natural are one. The ordinary and the extraordinary are one. You don't have to run off to a church to find God. You can find God walking down the street. You can find God walking in the shopping aisles at Woolworths. You can find God hanging out the washing. Okay, you can find God in your ordinary human everyday experiences. This is what the incarnation is saying. God became a human being, and for the first 30 years of his life, lived the life of an ordinary human being. You know, he was a carpenter. Okay, he made things with his hands. Okay, he lived a family life. So this is what the incarnation is saying. And this is the good news. This is already salvation. This is already telling us that we are loved by God. Jesus didn't have to die on a cross to prove his love. The incarnation is already telling us we are good, we are special, we are saved, because God has come down to us. We don't have to go up to God because God has come down to us. We can find God in our humanity. We don't have to sort of make ourselves all spiritual. We find God in our humanity. So the incarnation is saying that the body and that the earth is sacred, it's holy, because it's united with the spiritual. We find God in the material world. And this becomes the basis of an environmental ethics. It becomes the basis of a body spirituality, a spirituality that is incarnated in the body. Okay, next theme I want to look at, which I think is a major theme of the Bible, is this bias of God. And this is quite unique to the Bible, because it emphasizes this in a way that I don't think is really emphasized in the other religions of the world. It's there, but it certainly has an influence in the biblical tradition. And that's the idea that God is biased towards the poor. God is biased towards the suffering. God sort of gets involved in human history in order to help the poor and help the suffering of the world. And that's why you see people from around the world flocking to live in Western societies, because these societies, one of their main foundations is the Judeo-Christian tradition, which has as one of its main emphasis this emphasis to help the poor and the needy. And so we have in these Western societies, this great tradition of healthcare, welfare, education, of human rights, of looking after even the minorities in the society. These societies are not perfect by all means. The church hasn't always lived up to these ideals. The West hasn't always lived up to these ideals, but they're there. They're like a weed that has sort of spread throughout human history and often spread outside the institutional church itself and gone into so-called secular society. These values are there to help the needy, to help the poor, to help the victim, to help the minority, to help the marginalized and the outcast. These values are part of what Richard Rohr calls the biblical virus that have spread outside the institutional church itself and spread into secular society. And Jesus takes it one step further, which I think is a real sort of example of divine revelation, because I don't think it is something that the human being could have come to of their own volition. And that's the idea that not only should we help the poor, not only is God concerned with the poor, but in Jesus we have God identifying with the poor. When you clothe the naked, you clothe me. When you feed the hungry, you feed me. When you give shelter to the homeless, you give shelter to me. Okay, when you visit the sick, you're visiting me. We have God identifying with the poor. We have God. God is not sitting on some throne up in heaven. He's not some old man in the sky. Where is God? He is with the poor. He's with the least in society. This is an amazing idea. Mahatma Gandhi said, you can judge a society by how it treats the least in that society. Well, in Christianity, we have this idea of God. We have We have the supreme value being given to the least in society, because we have God identifying with the poor, God identifying with the suffering of the world, which I think is an amazing idea. God is found in what is least within you. God is found in your poverty. Our poverty and our brokenness and our sin is not something to be ashamed of, because Christ has identified with it, which is a symbol of the crucified. I think Carl Jung said that the deepest symbol in the psyche of Western man is the crucified Christ, is the crucified Jesus. So it is saying that we find God in the depths of our brokenness, that in the depths of our poverty, in the depths of our shame, we can find God there. So the darkness becomes the light, which again I think is an amazing idea. So these are just some of the themes of the Bible, the major themes of the Bible. They're like little crumbs spread in this big forest, and you pick up the crumbs and they will lead you out into the light. They will lead you out of the dark forest, which sometimes you think the Bible is. Whoa, what's this book talking about? It's leading towards love. It's leading towards communion with God, with other people, and with all of nature. And it's communion of the ordinary human being with God and with everything else. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have found this helpful. Thank you.